Welcome to Novelist Spotlight. This is Mike Consol, your host. Two quick things before introducing you to my guest. First, I encourage you to subscribe to this podcast by clicking on the follow button and also clicking on the bell icon so you're alerted to each new edition of the program. Second, in addition to being the producer of this podcast and interviewing novelists, I am a novelist myself. I've written 4 books, 3 novels, and 1 short story collection. In the episode notes, you will find a short link to my Amazon page and all 4 of those titles. Now, on with our program. In the spotlight is Libby Cudmore. She's young, vivacious, sassy. She loves the written word. She's been known to wear space buns, though not today. No space buns today. But, she's also a Shamus and Black Orchid award winner and the author of the acclaimed novel, The Big Rewind. As well as a novel titled Negative Girl. Well, we're going to learn more about just what makes her negative and if that girl is at all autobiographical. Her short stories have appeared in Alfred Hitchcock's Mystery Magazine and Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine, among other publications. She's also written the Anthony-nominated anthology Lawyers, Guns, and Money. Yeah, she didn't steal that exactly because it's crime fiction inspired by the music of Warren Zevon. And she lives in actually my part of the world, at least my part of the world where I grew up, and that would be upstate New York, along with her husband and cats. Libby Cudmore, welcome to the program.
Oh, it's so good to be here. Thank you. That was a very lovely intro.
Now, I don't expect you to tell the whole world where in upstate New York you live, but I hail from Endicott, New York, or the Binghamton area.
Yes.
Do you know that area?
I went to school at Binghamton. Actually, my crime fiction career starts at Binghamton University, and then I lived downtown for a little bit. So I love Binghamton.
Wow. So was John Gardner teaching there at the time, or Larry Y. Woody teaching?
No. John Gardner might have been gone by the time.
Yeah, probably.
Might have been dead.
He dates back a ways. And so does Larry Y. Woody, who unfortunately he's dead too. Sorry to say. I was getting close to getting him on the program, and the next thing I knew, he was gone. And so I ended up doing a program, but without him, just a retrospective sort of thing, and kind of told the story about how we had been texting back and forth or emailing back and forth, actually. Mm-hmm. And but came up short on that one. You know, Paul Auster was another one that I thought I was going to have in the program, and he died. And, you know, when I go to New York
Maybe
Times
I shouldn't be on this program. You seem like bad luck.
You're young, you're vivacious, like I said, so I don't think we're going to have any. This is not going to preordain anything. But I will say that when I go to the New York Times books section, it just seems like it's one obituary after another. So fortunately, you're young, nothing's going to happen. You've got cats that are protecting you and your husband, so we're good. So what part of upstate New York, without naming a town necessarily, but are you in the Finger Lakes area or?
No, I'm right near Binghamton.
Oh, you are? You're very close.
Sort of like in that central New York region, Southern Tier.
Oh, all right. All right. Then yeah, you know all the hot spots and such.
I do. My first novel, The Big Rewind, there's a section that actually takes place in Binghamton where 2 of the characters meet at the Belmar, which is a dive bar that was there when I was living there and is still there, still kind of divey. I love it. And then in Negative Girl, the town where that takes place, Perrine, is modeled on Binghamton. So I've got a real soft spot for the
Binghamton area, the Rust Belt, the old Rust Belt there.
Yep, it's always in my heart.
So you must have had done a little drinking at Thirsties.
I know. Never went out there. I know where it is, but never went there.
It's been there forever. That's why I know.
It's been there forever.
From the time I was it's been there at least, 60 years. I mean, it's been there a long time. It's amazing. Mm-hmm. I love it when I go back and visit to see family, and it's the businesses that stand the test of time that are still there that, give you a warm feeling.
Yeah. I guess the 50s is gone, though. I guess it went up in that fire.
Which one is that?
It was down on right before you went over the bridge. It was the sister bar to the Belmar.
And what's the name of it?
Fitzy's.
50s. Okay. I'm not even familiar with that one, but
yeah, I think that one might be gone. There was that awful fire a couple weeks back.
Oh, wow.
So for our listeners, we're also going to talk to Libby about an article she wrote for Writer's Digest magazine. It's called Five Tips for Writing Series Characters. Many of you are genre writers. She's a genre writer as well. At least I think you, I mean, is that offensive to you, Libby,
No,
or do you consider you're a detective writer, right? Detective and
yes.
crime.
Thank you for.
And
I've
you
always
teach
wanted
it.
somebody to straight up say like detective novelist, Libby Cudmore. So thank you for that. It's what I've always wanted to write, and what I am finally able to do.
There you are. And obviously those they have characters. Oftentimes those characters, well, like Travis McGee with John D. McDonald, Travis
Hmm.
McGee just
Hmm.
was, novel after novel was there. So are you a character dependent? And I don't mean that in a negative sense, but are you a character? Do you have a character who is going to be the thread throughout your detective novels?
I do. And actually, they date back. It's a Negative Girl. It's a pair, Martin Wade, who is a sort of early 50s detective, and his assistant, Valerie Jacks.
Ah,
And my the first Martin Wade story dates back to 2020, and was published in Ellery Queen Mystery Magazine. That's all shook down, and I really loved writing for Martin. When I first wrote Negative Girl, it was in Valerie's POV, but I found that I really liked writing for Martin, so I wrote a series of short stories with him, and gave him a co-narrative in Negative Girl. But the first stories start with him, and then add Valerie in the fourth story.
gotcha.
So,
Okay,
and then
so
the two of them continue.
uh-huh, uh-huh. Now, let me ask you about you teach you teach writing detective novels. You teach writing, and you
Yeah.
teach. Talk about what you teach and how you teach it. You teach crime and detective fiction, but if you can underscore maybe some of the essentials that you talk to your students about, that these are the things that you really need to keep front of mind and are really kind of critical to making your writing work.
Well, right now, I'm actually teaching short stories and flash fiction, which means everything you'd have to do in a novel, you just have to now do it smaller.
Mm.
And I am a very character focused writer. I always say that I come from the kind of Raymond Chandler school that way, like the characters and what they go through is first, and then I eventually get around to a mystery.
Hmm.
Um, and I think one of the things I always really stress to my students in any kind of writing that they're doing is to read it out loud and cut and be ruthless and trim the excess. When I teach a teen workshop in the summer, and I start the kids with 1,000 words. They can write a story up to 1,000 words. By the end of the week, they have 25 words.
Mm.
And you have to go
Wow.
through, and I work with them like, okay, now take 3 sentences out. Now write 300-word stories using these sentences. Um, I'm pretty ruthless when it comes to cutting, and
What
I,
gets cut? What gets cut? I mean, what's the low hanging fruit in terms of this is the stuff you can immediately just sweep away because it's really not doing you any good. Is there just can you kind of give us a category or two?
excess description. You just really don't need it. I see this a lot in teen writers, and I'm guilty of doing it when I was a teen writer. Is the physical descriptions, but they're always the physical descriptions of the character as they're seeing it. It's sort of like I put up my space buns and put on my Beetlejuice Lydia lipstick from Revolution X, and then I put on the vintage kimono that I got when I used to model for art classes in Binghamton. It's like none of that matters. Um, if anybody if the kimono comes back, or the red lipstick, or the leopard print claw clip, great. If not, you don't need it.
Well, you're also, I would argue, robbing the reader of their opportunity to co-create. If you give
Yeah.
a couple mar I always say, it's a couple marks of distinction about a character, and the reader will fill the rest in and co-create the character with you to their liking, which is why so often movies or even a streaming series, I think, frustrates people because, well, I'll give you the example I give at is The World According to Garp. I read the book, then I see the movie, and it's like Robin Williams, he's great, but he's not masculine enough to be Garp. Garp was a wrestler, a masculine guy, and Robin Williams
Hmm.
didn't fit the bill. So,
Yeah.
but that was me.
Yeah, I
And
kind of feel
so,
the
yeah,
same
I
way
mean,
about Elliot Gould in The Long Goodbye, like because I always come to Philip Marlowe as Humphrey Bogart, or sometimes I sort of cast him in my head as looking like Clive Owen. And so
mhm.
Elliot Gould is great, but to
But
me
he's not
that's
Clive Owen.
he's not, yeah, well, nobody is. Um uh it's not, he's not Marlowe. He's not my Marlowe. And that's, obviously like movies don't exist to make me happy except for Sin City, which was I think was specifically made to make me happy. Um
But that's
but
the director's problem is that he or she cannot possibly pick that character and make everybody happy, which is
oh
part of the
yeah.
whole frustration with movies. Is that yeah, not that, and there's so much left on the cutting room floor. Now, streaming series, I think, have changed the game because, I mean, you could literally do War and Peace if you did 10 or 15 seasons and 15 episodes per season of War and Peace. If somebody actually wanted to do that, you can really fill that all in. But
Yeah, but
it's hard.
yeah.
It's hard to sustain. I
Well,
mean,
and
how
I
many
think,
seasons can you really go and sustain it?
yeah, no kidding. But I think, like you said, distinguishing features, and in a novel, you have more space to play. And I'm definitely guilty. My big indulgence when I'm writing uh, novels is the clothes because I love clothes. And so I get really a little indulgent there. But in short stories, no, unless I sometimes, so Martin always wears these really beautiful suits. And that's a hallmark for him because he's a former punk, but that he takes his suits very seriously. So in like True Companion, which is the third story, when he has to put on like jeans and a hoodie and crawl around through the dirt, that's notable.
Hmm.
And he very rarely like reflects on his suit unless he's taking his jacket off. But there's a couple parts in Negative Girl where I can read my own overindulgence in the way Valerie is thinking about him. Like she wouldn't think about his suits the way I do. Because I'm fascinated by menswear. Um,
Was
that's a
that was
whole
that
different.
was that something? I mean, if you had not weren't already done and published, is that something you would have changed, or are you comfortable with how it turned out? That
It's
particular
fine. I
aspect,
think there are other things in there that I would probably tweak a little bit better, but uh,
but
I
you're
just
good with that
I'm good, and I
particular.
know sort of not to do it going forward. I've definitely found a lot longer passages about his suits. I'm obsessed with them.
Now, what kind of suit is it, Joseph Abboud, that you like, or do you literally get down to the manufacturer designer,
No, I just
Armani or anything like that, or are you a double-breasted suit kind of
oh yeah,
gal?
like yeah, just like this sort of like slim fit. Like he wears three-piece suits, in like silver, like like a very small silver check, I think she describes one of them as.
Is your husband a suit wearer? Do you have dominion over his wardrobe?
I don't, but I don't need to. He looks so good all the time.
Oh yeah, he's a dresser. He's a Sharpie.
Oh yeah.
Okay, good
Oh yeah.
deal. Good deal. Now,
You
why
don't get to
detect?
marry me if you're not,
That's
like
right.
I
You're
set
gonna
a
have to show
really
up in a
high
hoodie at the
standard.
altar.
No, he looks so good. He's a vest guy, which is what I'm all
Oh
about.
God, we have things in common. Upstate New York. My wife's name is Valerie. Your character
I
is
love that.
Valerie Jacks. I'm a vest guy. I would
I
go to
love
these
it.
big investment conferences, still do. And the
Hmm.
way I stand out in a crowd is I was the only guy wearing a vest, and people started knowing me as the vest guy.
Yeah, my the co-host that I had for the Shattered Shield podcast, for the Misbehave and the Righteous Gemstones podcast, which actually starts back up this week. Um,
Righteous
he's a
gemstones.
vest guy, Dashing Drew Root, and he got that because he would do his video game streams in a vest and a tie.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. Um, Yeah, I would go open collar. It's business casual these days, open collar. But even with an open collar, you put a vest on, it just dresses it up. And also, you
Yeah.
just stand out. There's
Yeah.
guys who wear bow ties, but I don't like bow ties. I'll do the vest.
Yeah. You can
Um,
always find me at a conference because I'm the one in the like I've got a like 6 foot radius around me because of my crinolines. Like I always really like leopard print, polka dots. Like you can pick me out of a crowd. Big sky high hair.
why detective fiction? That's your genre. How old were you when you decided that's my channel?
Um, this is my favorite story. So it was 20 years ago last fall, and I took Michael Sharp's Arthurian literature class at Binghamton University.
Mm.
And I don't remember why or how I signed up for this class. I I don't have, I mean, I like Arthurian literature now, but I didn't know a whole lot about it. Didn't know the professor, just kind of ended up in this class. And at the end of the class, we read The Long Goodbye, and Professor Sharp explained how it had an Arthurian tradition and how the mystery has a quest narrative. And I have been trying to write fantasy. I'm a 90s girl. I used to play Dungeons and Dragons with my friend Ben, and I it all clicked that was what I wanted to be writing. I read The Long Goodbye in one sitting, and like I can still picture my dorm exactly as it was and how I was seated, and I would listen to Tom Waits just on repeat and read The Long Goodbye. I read through dinner. I read until bedtime, and it mesmerized me, and I was like, this is what I want to do with the rest of my life. And it was such a great time in crime fiction because it was sort of that second golden age where you had movies like Sin City, you had Inside Man, Children of Men, you had Charles Ardai starting Hard Case Crime, like all of these great crime fiction reprints. And it was a great era to be in and to write in.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, as you say, I'm a character guy too. You love characters. I feel like characters are what really drive a story and what really interests me because I'm interested in people. So, getting back to your Writer's Digest piece, 5 tips for writing series characters. So, not just a character, but a series character, which means, I guess, you tell me, Libby, over time, over a series of novels, there needs to be the character evolves, you need to be revealing stuff about that character over the course of many books.
Hmm.
And, somebody might think, well, you could run out of things, but not as they're aging, though, and they're changing.
Yeah. I don't know how long. I'd like to write uh, at least 2 more books with Martin and Valerie, and then just kind of untold number of short stories. Because in the short story, you don't necessarily have to have them changing, because the
Hmm.
short detective story it really is about the case. Um, but I think with the novels, especially because Negative Girl is so focused on Martin and Valerie's past, I do sometimes worry, like, am I going to run out of material with these two? But I have plans for at least 2 more books, possibly
With them as your
fourth.
main characters,
Yep.
as your protagonists. Okay.
So
So, but you do see a day when, look, I do a series of maybe 4 or 5, and then I'm going to have a new character for maybe the next 3 or 5 or 10, whatever it might be.
yeah, or switch. Sometimes I think I might like to write a haunted house novel or a
Haunted House. Yes.
standalone. Um.
Who
So
wrote Haunted House? It's Jackson. She was the crazy woman who about a great writer. I forget her full
Shirley
name.
Jackson,
Shirley
Haunting of
Jackson.
Hill
Yep.
House.
The Haunting of Hill House, or was that it? The Haunting of Hill House?
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So good. I mean, did that inspire you, or was this something that happened independent of having maybe read that or learned about it?
I mean, I read it. I'm always, you lived in upstate New York. Upstate New York is super haunted. So just growing up in a haunted house, I currently live
Rod
in a haunted
Serling is
house.
from there. Rod Serling
Yeah,
of the Twilight
the
Zone
Twilight
went
Zone.
to, I
Yeah.
think, Binghamton Central High School, and
Yep.
yeah, great,
Binghamton,
great.
like the Binghamton area is where all the cool people live, and are from and spent time in. My favorite piece of Binghamton trivia is that Steve Perry, who's the front man for the Cherry Poppin' Daddies, who were a huge favorite band of mine, grew up in Appalachian.
Appalachian. Okay, and there's also the Mafia House in Appalachian, which is a
Yeah, and you
great,
could have.
great thing to go by.
Yeah, and he has a couple songs where you're like, oh, you clearly like, I hear Binghamton in this. I hear Appalachian. I hear like the fascination with the mob.
That is
Um,
cool. That is
yeah,
cool. So you've got your 5 tips for writing series characters. Again, this was published in Writer's Digest. Let's walk through those 5 tips, starting with tip number
sure.
1, which I see here is start with compelling characters.
Yeah, you have to.
What makes
Uh,
a character compelling? What would, if you're talking to your students, what are the hallmarks of a compelling character?
well, the you need to be able to want to spend time with them, to want to unravel who they are. And I think you can't front load it all at once. And you have to think about what makes a person, like an actual person in your life, what makes them compelling, what makes you want to invite them over to your house. And you have to apply that to your character. And you may not want characters over your house. They may be terrible, but they need to be interesting. Nobody wants a boring character who doesn't do anything.
Do you think readers, I mean, on one hand, you've got somebody like James Bond, who, although that's not a detective thing, it's international espionage, but you've got somebody, I mean, an entire franchise built on this one character. It's amazing. Amazon just bought the rights to Bond now.
Yeah, they'll ruin it.
Oh, you think they will? Oh, God,
Yeah,
I
they
hope
ruin
not.
everything.
Oh, I hope not. At any rate, but then, do you think readers appreciate flawed characters? For
God,
instance,
yes.
they do. Okay,
Yes.
because like some detectives are, they drink too much, or they're in poor health, and they don't eat well. What is it
Uh-huh.
about flawed? Do you feel that the readers just relate more to somebody who's flawed? Because hey, look, I've got flaws. We're all flawed, and I don't really find the character believable if he's a James Bond type, because he never fails and he never has a
Yeah.
problem.
We want to see characters bleed a little bit, and I think it plays to our sense of empathy and our way of connecting with them. I think I wonder if there's a problem now because character flaws and compelling characters and anti-heroes have been really perverted, and you find, I'm sure people could argue that like superheroes have flaws, but they're so, I don't know, they're written in the broadest possible way. Um and they're not human flaws. They
Hmm.
are, here's the point where the character reveals a dark tragedy about their backstory. Now let's move on to punching things. And so sometimes I wonder um if humans right now, if readers can empathize with a flawed character, because there's also this sense that, well, the character thinks what the author thinks. And that's not true. Um, obviously like an author's values can come through in the work, but there's some resistance to flawed characters, and I don't,
Resistance from where? You mean from the author or the audience, or where?
for sometimes from the audience.
Hmm.
Um
Some people
and
want him to be uh, basically flawless or close to flawless.
yeah, and or have such kind of broad flaws, like, oh, they had a sad childhood, so they can do whatever. Like there now, I have a cheap sympathy for them. Complicated characters are just that. They're complicated, and they're not always going to do the right thing. And as long as it's well written, And as long as it makes sense within the character to do those wrong things, to make those stumbles, I think they're important. And
Mm-hmm.
I think we need those characters to be able to tell the kind of human stories we want to tell. Otherwise, what's the point of any of it?
Mm-hmm. So tip number 2, this is interesting. Don't neglect your supporting cast.
Yes.
How do you obviously you have your lead character. How do you make sure that your supporting cast is not just kind of a folding chair that's been thrown to the side?
Well, I think that again comes down uh, to making actual characters and not just NPCs. These characters need to be distinct. They need to exist within the world, because when you write a story, you're creating a world. But within that, each of the characters you write should be able to have a spin-off story if you were to want to write that. They should be compelling enough that somebody could pick them up and write fan fiction about them, even
Mm-hmm.
from their little tiny space. And Martin and Valerie were neglected side characters. They were side characters. They were the client from a sequel to The Big Rewind that never got picked up. But I kept coming back to them and what I had written for them. And I really liked the way they engaged with each other. They were a father-daughter pair at that point. But I took away the familial. And was able to build them, and not a whole lot changed.
Mm-hmm.
Valerie probably underwent the most changes, because in the original version, she was like an Amy Winehouse type, and she ended up dead.
Mm.
But then her dad
From
Martin as the client, trying to figure out what killed her.
So she had
And
substance abuse problems, or was it more
yeah,
devious than that? Okay.
but of course, murder mystery, it would have been more devious. But a lot of that became Negative Girl. Um, but Valerie became sort of a much different character. A lot of that ended up in the character Janie.
So
But
Martin and Valerie would not go away.
no,
They presented themselves and
they just kind of kept hanging around. I just really liked them, and I really liked writing for them. And when you create side characters like that, tell their stories.
so let's go to tip number 3. Leave room for your characters to grow throughout the series. Now, how much thinking ahead for you? Are you thinking ahead to other novels, future novels, or are you just thinking in terms of, I want them to grow through this book. I'll worry about their future growth. If they reappear, I'll worry about their future growth. Well, they will reappear because we're talking about characters in a series. So, how much do you think ahead versus just stick with the current story?
Um, with Martin, I laid out a storyline for him in the very first story, that has to do with the disappearance of his fiancee, Cecilia. That's mentioned in All Shook Down. So at some point, that has to be resolved. So
What
and
about? No, I was going to jump to the next tip, but did you have more
oh,
to
go
say
no, go
on?
ahead.
Yeah, that's number 4, which would be pay close attention to time. What do you mean by that?
So and I'm not always great at this, but keep an eye on the calendar. If you're going to have a story set in December, you need to mention. I mean, like, obviously, our December, got it set on another planet or in a different world. This may not matter, but it's a good way to orient your readers. If you have a story taking place in December, mention that decorations are going up, that they
Hmm.
have to buy presents, or that no one is buying presents for them, or that they hate the holidays for whatever reason. But keep track of time, because you don't want to have a story that you mention it's Christmas in Binghamton, but you don't have the character putting on a coat. And
Yeah.
again, you may not need to show them putting on a coat, but it's those little details that are important. And if you say that this took place 6 months ago, and then the next story you write, you mention that it took place 3 months ago, then you've got
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
timeline that doesn't add up. So you do need to set a timeline. I have used, like, you get a planner and you mark off like important dates for when things should be. I tend to always, for some reason, set my stuff in September, and I have to walk it back. I think, new school year. There's not really a whole lot of holidays in December because you get into October, you're preparing for Halloween. You get into November, you're planning for Thanksgiving, and then, Christmas and Hanukkah and Yule and New Year's and Valentine's Day and St. Patrick's Day and my birthday,
Mhm.
which I don't think they would be prepared for, but you never know.
Yeah. It's an interesting point because I know with my own writing, I'll be going along and then I realize, what time frame has this transpired over? You got to kind of
Mhm.
figure that out because it's not going to be continually summer or continually winter or fall or whatever.
Yeah,
So yeah, it's definitely and that's the kind of thing a careful reader will pick up on, just like, well,
yeah,
what's going on here?
and that
Uh,
you can use it in your stories. There's a Martin and Valerie story, the one I won the Black Orchid for, that was in Alfred Hitchcock, called Alibi and Ice, which uses winter in upstate as part of the crime. This Valerie goes and finds this girl who has been left in a snowdrift.
yes. Yeah, and that can happen
Yeah. So,
in that part of the
um,
world.
yeah, and it can be fatal. So, it's about piecing all that together, and winter plays this huge part in it. There's another story coming out in Alfred Hitchcock called The Lonely Repairman that takes place during a heat wave, and that
Mm,
is part of the case.
hmm
Um,
hmm
so, sometimes these things matter, sometimes they don't, but always when you're writing a series, make sure you know where the characters are oriented in their own timeline.
Now, tip number 5 is make a trail of breadcrumbs. Talk
Yes.
about that.
So, that also goes into the earlier tip about leaving room for your characters to grow throughout the series. You don't have to reveal everything in the first book, and you don't have to reveal everything in the second book or the third book. You need to at some point reveal everything. And I'm a very tightly focused writer. Um, so I like to know, I like everything to be wrapped up, but it doesn't all have to be wrapped up right away.
Hmm
And sometimes
hmm
you can leave those little threads. And that also goes back to supporting characters, because you don't know when that DMV clerk might come forward with a case or her story.
Yeah, yeah.
So it all ties together. All of these tips kind of all come together.
So when you are writing, talk about your writing regimen. Are you regimented about your writing? You get up a certain time each day and you work to a certain word count or time frame. What's your working schedule like?
It's right now it's like a little bit in flux. I generally try to get up. I'm an early writer, so I get up and I write for about an hour, listening to records, and that a lot of times um is it for sort of the casual writing. If I'm on deadline, obviously it's a little different. It's I might do more on weekends, but I do I work a 9 to 5. So
Right. So you
so
work your writing in the
yep.
morning.
And then I teach sometimes at night. So I teach through the writer's circle. I teach that Wednesday nights.
What
So
is a good day of writing to you? I mean, what is your barometer? Is it a word count? Is it the quality of the copy? Is it that simple for you, or is it just too many factors to really just say these one or two are it?
it's when I don't want to stop, because I
Hmm.
do set a timer. Um, because I am writing and I have to know, like, okay, it's time to go get ready for work. Um, but when I feel like I get to a place and I want to keep going,
hmm
when I'm
Yeah,
really
that's
excited about, like, that to me is a good day.
yeah.
It can be tough. Um, I can have days that aren't great, or sometimes I just write in my journal.
Hmm.
And I'll spend the whole morning writing in that. Some days the words just don't come. This morning was a good writing day, I'll say that.
Yeah, that's good to hear.
Yeah.
Your mood is good.
Oh.
Your mood's probably always good, but it certainly doesn't hurt to have a good writing day. What about lawyers, guns, and actually, before I ask you about that, you mentioned playing music while you're writing. What do you like to listen to? What's your musical genre, or is there a certain kind of music you listen to when you're writing and maybe certain kinds of music that you wouldn't listen to while you're writing because it is too distracting? Like maybe
um,
lyrics, maybe sung lyrics interfere with your own prose. Do you
no.
listen to just instrumental music, or is it singing?
I listen to everything. And I always pick up my record the night before. So tomorrow's record. So when this airs, I will have listened to Jerry Lee Lewis, Rock and Rhythm and Blues. Um, this morning I was listening to the B-52's Mesopotamia, and then the Lemonheads, Car Button Cloth. So it really varies. It's funny though, because especially with Martin, who was um, a musician, his band, the French Letters, was kind of a replacements era band. You can definitely tell what I've been listening to because it will show up in the stories. So, he will, like, if he's answering a call, he'll be like, I turned down the Lemonheads, or he'll like reflect on meeting a band member or something like that. So like he exists in in these bands, like
Hmm.
among them. So, he can talk about opening for the Replacements. He could talk about how much he loves the House Martins. And a lot of that, I have to give credit so much of Martin from his look and his personality, comes from my friend Jay Carnes, who read for him in the audiobook. But like Jay will just call me and say, like, have you listened to this Replacements record? And sure enough, that will show up later on. So a lot of times what Martin is listening to is what Jay and I had talked about uh, earlier, including the first story, All Shook Down, which is Jay's favorite Replacements album.
Hmm. Hmm.
Mine is Pleased to Meet Me, followed by Don't Tell a Soul.
So you get material from music, you get material from your environment there in upstate New York, but you're originally from Oklahoma. Are you a Sooner? Is that right?
Yes, I was born out there. I still have family out there. I was out there in February. I'll be back out there in June. Um, so I spent a lot of my summers there.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So lawyers, guns, and money.
Yes.
Tell us about it's crime fiction inspired by the music of Warren Zevon. Tell us how that came into being and what a reader can expect from it.
Well, that I co-edited that with Art Taylor, and Art is wonderful. And he came to me with the idea of doing this anthology. Warren Zevon is one of the most important musicians in my life. I've been listening to him since I was a child, and his music plays a pretty big role in the Big Rewind. It opens with a line from his song "Searching for a Heart." And so Art approached me about doing this. We reached out to writers we knew, writers like Matthew Quinn Martin, Alex Segura. Um, we just reached out to all these great writers and got these incredible stories. And then my story, which is actually kind of a prequel for Martin, is what won the Shamus Award. I did the story based on the song Charlie's Medicine.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Now, tell us about Negative Girl. I love that title.
Thank
That's
you.
your most recent novel, correct?
Yes, yes.
And tell us why is the title Negative Girl? I haven't read it, I gotta say, but tell me about it.
Well, one, read it. It's great. And or get the audiobook. I read for Valerie, and Jay reads for Martin, and he kills it. He's he's so amazing. The original title was The Girl in the River, And that was a title I kept for a really, really, really long time because it kind of harkened back to The Lady in the Lake. And my first book was The Big Rewind, kind of a take on The Big Sleep. And I realized I didn't want to be doing that level of Chandler homage my whole life. Like I didn't want to get locked into that. Um, but I was listening to Steely Dan's Two Against Nature, which is, I think a lot of Steely Dan fans don't love that, and they're wrong because it's an amazing album. And there's a song on there called Negative Girl that is, it's hard to pick like what the best track on that album is, but it's up there. And that kind of, I thought that fit. And I was expecting that it would get changed, but it stuck. So and I think going forward, a lot of the Wade and Jack stories are titled for songs. So True Companion is a Donald Fagen composition from Heavy Metal. There, Wait for the Blackout is a song by The Damned. So I think
You're very influenced by music. And I saw
yeah,
when we first got on and had the video turned on, I could see, I mean, your writing room there is very much a music fandom room. Absolutely.
yeah, it's got my whole record collection and my turntable, Walter.
Still doing turntable. Yeah,
Yeah.
I always bought albums and then because I didn't like tapes, they hissed.
Hmm.
But then they started pressing too many LPs and they were snap, crackle, and pop. And it's like, take it back and give me a different one that's got a clean sound. Because a
Yeah.
well-pressed album is clean, very clean.
Yeah.
And then comes, the CDs, of course, came along and those are ultra clean. Um, and so on. But the turntable is still, there's a lot you can do with them, including scratching. And it's just, there's a romantic aspect to turntables. I mean, I grew up with them,
Yeah.
so
And
I love them.
I do too. I remember listening to my dad's records. I really like the tactile nature of records. And I was collecting records sort of before it became popular again. So I'm not saying that I personally brought records back, but everybody else is kind of copying me. So if you
You're an influencer.
I am. I'm a
You
vinyl
are.
influencer. I used to do a show back on Twitter every Saturday called Record Saturday, where I would spin an album front to back, and talk about it. And it was great to do over Twitter because you could be listening to the album and reading, and it wouldn't be me talking over the album, but it was a communal sense. And I think that's what I like best about vinyl is that when I put on a record, everybody's listening to it. Sometimes to the chagrin of my husband, who maybe doesn't want to listen to the Smiths. Maybe he'd rather do anything else. Maybe he'd rather like fill his ears with quicksand than listen to Morrissey.
Um,
So,
but you mentioned the album covers, and that was a big thing, was
hmm,
reading the liner notes, reading
yes,
about who's playing in the band and what instruments and vocals, and sometimes there'd be lyrics printed, especially if it folded out. You'd get the whole all the lyrics, especially if it was a double album or they folded out or
the gatefold, yeah,
yeah, the gatefold and yeah, it was just part of the experience, listening to the music and learning about it at the same time. And they tried to do that with CDs, but it's such a small format that just didn't
yeah.
work the same.
No, but there's a new Vapors album, and I'm a huge fan of Vapors. I'd interviewed Dave Fenton for Albumism a while back. Their new album, I'm in the liner notes
Oh, you
because
are.
I donated to the Kickstarter.
Oh,
So
nice.
so it's fun to like open it up and be like I'm part of this album, which is fun. And
Acknowledgements. Yeah.
yeah, and I have a lot of signed albums. I think all but one of my Cherry Pop and Daddy's records is signed. I've got a couple signed Vapors albums. So that kind of thing is really fun.
What do you look for in music? I mean, what makes it, I mean, does it have to be great lyrics? Does it have to be, because, there's not that many great songwriters out there. A lot of popular bands, it's kind of like the lyrics. I try to treat the singing like it's just another instrument because what they're saying is kind of juvenile or just not very inspired, actually. Um, so what does it for you musically? I know that you have a very broad appetite for music, But what's a winner versus a loser?
I need to feel it in my core. It's not something where I can be like, oh well, I like all albums that do this. It's like I have to feel
Mm,
it. I have to emotionally connect with it, and it has to be like I have to feel passion when I hear it, or I
hmm
have to feel luxurious, or I have to be sad, or whatever the emotion that I want to feel. Like I have such an emotional connection with music, um, which is why I kind of can't just like listen to anything. I listen to a lot, but I'm not just like, oh, I'm just going to put this on in the background. Like there have been times where, I'll be listening to music and I'll sort of get so caught up in how I feel about the music that I'm not doing what I need to be doing, like the dishes or um,
Right.
writing or,
Well, I'm
making
glad you said
sausage roll.
sad because I love listening to sad music, and my wife would say, "Why are you listening to that? It's sad." And it's like that's why I listen to it. I
Yeah.
love the feeling. I mean, I mean, it's with any art form, whether it's writing or music or the visual arts. I just feel that part of its purpose is to make us feel the full spectrum of emotions, and
Yeah.
just connect us to our humanity right down
And
to the core.
I think one of the worst emotions I've ever felt was, because I have a lot of music, and anyone who's read The Big Rewind knows this. Feel like music connected with people in my life and, exes and things like that, old friends. And I was listening to a record and it didn't make me think about this person anymore. And it felt like a piece of my soul was gone. Not that I couldn't feel it getting ripped out, but just like I spent years listening to this song and thinking about this one person, and now they're just gone. Like they're not even a memory. It's just
Mm,
like it's it becomes rote, it becomes routine. Like, oh, this is the song that reminds me of blank, but without the emotion in there. And it was this terrible emptiness. And I couldn't listen to the song again. Um, and
yeah.
like that sucks because it's a band that I really like, but so much of the music was locked up in this person and how I felt
Yeah.
about them.
Yeah.
And so, and like in some cases that can be liberating, but for me it felt soul crushing.
hmm I get what you mean though about, needing to feel the music. There's just so much nuance in music and there's so much it's very subjective, but um it's very individual in that way.
Yeah.
Uh, Now, let me ask you about your bio 20 years hence or 30 years hence. We're reading your Wikipedia entry about Libby Cudmore or your website, which, by the way, listeners, the URL to Libby's website is in the episode notes where you can learn more about her. What do you want to accomplish in the next 20 or 30 years and be in your bio? I mean, if you had 100% control over this, what are some of the milestones you want to hit?
um, I'd love to be compared to Raymond Chandler
Mm.
favorably, ideally. Um, I always joked when I was asking Sean Cosby for the blurb that he ended up giving me for Negative Girl, which was so kind of him. I was like, you don't even have to read it. I know you're busy. You can just write Libby Cudmore is Raymond Chandler with great legs. Um, so
After all, she used to model for the artist, right? I mean, you must have been disrobed, and it's good that you have pride in what God rendered there.
yeah, well, I figure, I'm a 5'3" girl with huge glasses, like, and my hair is going gray. Like, I need to fake it till I make it, I guess. But
So
I,
Raymond Chandler with great
yeah,
legs
yeah,
and that kind of critical acclaim. Is there
yeah,
anything else that you would add? I mean, a lot of writers say, I want I'd like my work to be put on the big screen or put into streaming. You see so many books these days that the streaming series based on books, which is amazing that so many novels these days get that second life.
yeah.
Um,
Oh, I'd love to. I'd love to have a streaming series. And I guess I'd love to become so popular and so well regarded that Danny McBride hires me to write for one of his shows.
Now, Danny McBride, you'll have to educate me.
The Righteous Gemstones, Vice
Oh,
Principals.
and we watched the what a hysterical series the Righteous Gemstones is.
Yeah, you should check out. I got a podcast on it. I believe the only Righteous Gemstones podcast, Misbehaving.
And is that are you talking about one episode or it's a whole series
it's a whole series. We've done all 3
episodes about
seasons. We're kicking off season 4 this week.
Amazing.
Tomorrow night.
Good deal. Good
Yeah.
deal. Is it season 4 starts tomorrow night?
It started last night.
Last night.
Oh my God,
Okay.
it's such a good episode.
Oh wow. Yeah, we've fallen a little bit behind. I don't think we made it through season 3 yet, but
season 3
here
is
comes
rough.
4. Season 3 what?
Season 3 is a little rough.
Is it?
It made some choices that I would not have made as a writer, but
season 4 off to a good start.
Season 4 is off to a great start.
Nice.
But yeah, either that, I'd love it. I mean, my dream would be someone like Sean Ryan adapting my work.
Oh, there you go.
The Shield is my favorite show. I'm actually from my desk where I write. I've got a signed script from the episode Family Meeting that Sean signed for me, and then I've got a picture of Jay as Dutch.
How do you meet all these people?
Twitter.
Oh, through Twitter. Okay, gotcha.
So I'm not on Twitter anymore because it's a Nazi bar, but I am on Blue Sky. So I lost you again. Might come back. Is it my casual nature? There you are.
Yeah. Okay. Here we go. All right. Sorry. If you can go ahead and pick up where you left off, Libby.
I don't even remember.
That's okay. I have another question for you.
Yeah.
How do you expect your writing to change as you age? Now, obviously, you want to look back and say, wow, I've become a much better writer than I was then. But just the nature of your writing, do you look back now and the nature of your writing has changed over time in a way that is noticeable? And then what about, say, in 20 years, do you have any sense? I know this is not an easy question, but do you have any sense for how you think your writing will evolve or change as you get older?
Well, it's definitely become less personal, which I think in a lot of ways has allowed me to write more intimately.
And what do you mean by less personal, though? In what sense?
There's so much and I'm not saying The Big Rewind is, autobiographical, but I put a lot of like my little quirks in there and definitely a lot of my ex-boyfriends. This one, Negative Girl's a lot less personal. It's so much more removed. I am not Valerie. I wish I was because she's cool as hell, but there's sort of less of me in her or in Martin. And so I think I'm getting a little more detached from being within my own writing. I think 20 years from now, I would have liked to have written again like a haunted house novel, an adventure novel, a road trip novel. Like I would like to have written so many other things because I hate being pigeonholed. I love detective fiction. It is my truest love. But I also love like really odd flash fiction. I mean, my dream would be to write a Lydia Dietz book. Like
interesting.
Yeah.
I've had a couple. Oh, go ahead.
No, just a sort of between Beetlejuice and Beetlejuice 2, which I did see Beetlejuice 2 because I don't believe in legacy sequels as a rule.
You mentioned flash fiction, and I've had a couple people on the program talking about flash and microfiction. And right now I'm reading the collected stories of Lydia Davis. It's audio. I do a lot of audiobooks because I read all day. So in the evening, I let my ears do the story tracking and all that. And wow, some of those stories are, literally a minute and a half. And then there's others that are, 20 or 30 minutes. But I mean, it's a 20-hour listen, and it's got 199 stories. Uh,
Amazing.
it is amazing, and which means, of course, that a lot of them are microfiction, and then you've got a lot of flash fiction in there as well.
Hmm.
So the fact that you have written flash fiction, you think about flash fiction, the principles of it. When you getting back to your students, you tell them take that 1,000 word, and make it, I don't know, what did you say, 15 or 30 words? You over time you're distilling and you're distilling. This reductionism goes on until
Hmm.
you've boiled it down. So basically, there's a lot of connective tissue that gets taken out of there, which, like you said, is not. A lot of times, I think that the cause of overwriting is that a writer sometimes doesn't trust the reader to understand. Well,
Hmm.
that says more about you as a writer, really, because they should understand. And I think we underrate the reader a lot of times.
We
They're going to
do.
connect the dots, and they're going to fill in the blanks.
Hmm.
What they don't, I think, forgive is lapses in timelines and well, wait a minute, the character. You said before the character's this. Now you're saying that. That kind of stuff
Yeah,
is
the
just bad.
sloppy writing makes me
Yes,
crazy.
that's not good, but they will fill in a lot of blanks. And again, I use that term co-create, and I think that's the genius of fiction writing, is that the reader gets to be a participant. When you see a movie, the director makes all the choices. You don't really
Yeah.
get to make choices. So, it's a lazy way to take in the arts of movie watching or even streaming series. You're an active participant with fiction when you're reading fiction.
So, although you've never watched Roadhouse with me, I'm definitely an active participant in that.
Roadhouse, is that the Patrick? You're talking about the Patrick
Yes.
Swayze one? You
Yep.
mean you're like throwing things at the TV and swearing at?
Yelling and whistling. We watch it every year at Barrel House Writer Camp. And there's nothing like watching Roadhouse with other writers. It's really, I mean, people just go crazy. It's great. It's the most fun thing I can think of to do. Like, honestly,
You mean you guys are
AWG,
critiquing it as it goes?
no, we're just hooting and hollering.
In
And
a good, I mean, are you enjoying it
oh
or?
yeah, absolutely. It's it's my favorite movie to show people, and especially people who haven't seen it or haven't seen it in a long time. And the best thing is, so we watch it every Friday night at Barrel House Writer Camp, and um, we put it on, and people who haven't seen it lose their minds. I got to show it to Matt Bell last year, and he was like literally on the floor. He could not believe that this movie was happening. It was amazing. It was like it's the best when you show people Roadhouse who have not seen the film Roadhouse.
I mean, it's notorious for being a bad movie. You know that.
It's not it's
I mean, is
not
that the
bad.
appeal?
It's
Is that
just it's it's bonkers. It's not bad. And I've seen bad movies. I watch Mystery Science Theater 3000, and I'm fascinated by failed cinema. Not necessarily like, oh, it's good or bad, but like it failed somehow in its objective. And Roadhouse is just it's the kind of film I know they tried to remake it and I refuse to acknowledge it. And Jake Gyllenhaal should be in film prison forever. But
he's done a
it's
lot of good work though?
well, lots of people do lots of good work and then they do crimes. And he should be honestly, if I was president, Jake Gyllenhaal would be sentenced to serve hard time in one of those McDonald land, like the old Mayor McCheese jails. Yeah, he can go in there. He knows what he did. Um,
Major offense. Major offense.
well, because you can't make Roadhouse anymore because people don't do that much cocaine. Like
Right.
that's a movie
Yeah.
that could only be made in the 80s. It's ridiculous. It's a ridiculous, beautiful, magical movie that you can't remake.
Yeah.
It's
No,
like
I
Showgirls is the closest thing we have to it, and that Showgirls is banana pants. It's just you can't plan for that kind of magic.
right, right. So what are you watching on Netflix and the other streaming channels now? You mentioned The Righteous Gemstones. What are
Yep.
some of the other shows that you like to watch?
Um, I mean, I will have on, like, if I'm trying to just chill or like do crafts, I'll have Mystery Science Theater 3000 on. Um, I don't watch a ton of new television. I don't watch a ton of TV. Um, but
It eats up time.
it does, and we only have one TV, so my husband and I have to sort of decide what show we're watching, which is fun. Um, but yeah, The Righteous Gemstones right now is my sort of like must-see TV.
Hmm.
And I want to put out there that I've been a fan of Walton Goggins for like ever. I love him. I loved him on The Shield. I've loved him in everything. I've seen so many garbage movies that he is in just to see his beautiful face. And now everyone's like, Walton Goggins is great. Like, yeah, I could have told you that. I could have told you that 15 years ago, but you didn't listen to me. Um,
Do you watch The White Lotus?
I should.
It's very
I
good.
don't. I'm
It's
probably
very
not going to
good.
get around to it. And I'm terrible about that kind of thing. Like, I
The
will
Queen's
start a show.
Gambit? The Queen's Gambit?
I tried, couldn't get into it.
Really?
I
Okay.
know.
Yeah.
I tried so
Everybody's
many
got their
things.
own taste.
It's I can't be pinned down when it comes to those kind of things. It's like music, like it just has to grab me. Lately though, my husband and I have been going to the movies more often, which I hadn't done for a long time, but our movie theater does $5 Tuesdays. So we saw Love Hurts, we saw The Monkey.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
I think we're gonna go tomorrow night and see something. So like I said, I can't be pinned down.
No, that's good. What are you reading right now? Do you have a book going that you're reading or listening to?
Um, let's see. I'm I'm in a little bit, not a slump, but every so often I will go back to a book I've read like a million times. So right now it's Marvelous Land of Oz.
Marvelous Land of Oz.
Yeah, it's my favorite Oz book, and um, my husband found a copy that he had and gave it to me, and so I've sort of been rereading that just
Hmm.
to kind of reconnect with that wonder. I did just finish. I finished reading a couple friends' manuscripts, which is
Hmm.
always fun. Um, and I'm sort of looking at what I'm going to read next. I just finished a book on the history of striptease as well.
Aha, wow. The history
So,
of striptease.
yeah, I'm a big fan of old school burlesque and that
You've
kind of
seen the
thing.
movie Striptease probably too, or read the Carl Hyacин's book Striptease. I
I
don't think that's
haven't. I'm
I
just
don't think
getting
that's
in.
one of his best. I do not think that's one of his best, by the way. So, have you read Carl Hyacin at all?
I'm reading Razor Girl, or I started
Razor
it. I need
Girl,
to get
okay.
back to it. And I've got Bad Monkey on deck. I started trying to watch the
Oh,
Bad
that's right.
Monkey
That's
show
Hyacin. That's right.
and couldn't get into it. Carl Hyacin and Warren Zevon were friends, so it's been a long time
Oh,
coming.
so there's that
Need to,
connection. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, Libby, listen, we're past an hour, and I really have enjoyed talking with you.
Oh my
And
God, it's been so
the,
fun.
the names have been flying, and it's great to meet you. And I want to tell again our listeners, LibbyCudmore.com will take you there. The URL is in the episode notes. You can learn more about Libby there. And there's some great recordings over on YouTube, of course, as well. But really glad you stuck with us, listeners. And
Thanks.
Libby, thanks a million for taking the time and
Oh,
giving us
thank
this
you.
shot of energy.
Oh my God, this was so much fun. Thank you so much.